And something else about Rudolph, in his autobiography, he tries to say that he's not racist. He clearly is. However, he makes a half-hearted effort to try to show that he's not, reminiscent of some of the rhetorical tricks the alt-right used maybe back in 2015. I'm not really racist, but. And much of that conversation stems from the fact that it's very out there that Eric Rudolph was a part of the Christian identity movement. Just to counteract some of his claims, the Anti-Defamation League in their archives collected many responses to real time. So in the 1990s, real responses to the actions of Eric Rudolph. And these all came from Christian identity groups, neo-Nazi groups, etc. One of them is a posting on the website of the Pennsylvania faction of Aryan Nation, the Christian identity neo-Nazi group, lamenting that Rudolph was captured and called him a hero. Let his enemies gloat, for their days are numbered. There will always be another to fill the shoes of a fallen hero. The enemy has not won and will never win. Another one recorded by the ADL in reaction to Eric Rudolph's actions in the 1990s. A skinhead from Atlantic City lamented on a neo-Nazi message board that another good, solid white warrior becomes another prisoner of war. We need more lone wolves, way more. And I find that interesting. One, because there's a pretty obvious spelling error in it, but two, more importantly, because it just completely blows up the idea or the concept of the lone wolf, which has been used for the past 30 years to essentially excuse or separate mainstream conservatives from the actions of right-wing extremists. They're lone wolves. There's no cohesive ideology. They're all just crazy. No. On the White Revolution message board, it said, he rid this world of some degenerate scum in a couple of his bombings and made the government spend millions of dollars finding him. That is all that really matters to me. One day, all the lies, deceit, and purposeful destruction of the white race will come back at them tenfold. Centennial Park. His accounts of the bombing amount to a training manual and way to control the narrative. This is a huge topic, and Rudolph goes into great detail describing the bombing. Rudolph describes his time in Western North Carolina testing bombs, how he set up his trailer to monitor people who might be sneaking around, how he made bombs, tested bombs, obtained materials for bombs, how he cased Centennial Park, how he checked security. And it became apparent that the document was akin to a training manual. The election of Bill Clinton seemed to be the spark that prompted Rudolph from rhetoric to action. While this is speculative, it wouldn't be the first time an election of a president seemed to be the crossing of an imaginary line in the mind of a right-wing extremist, as we saw with Jim Atkinson and the Unitarian Universalist church shooting after the election of Barack Obama in a previous episode. There isn't much need to delve deeply into Rudolph's portrayal of Bill Clinton, as it's basic culture war standard stuff. But some specific things that Rudolph called out. Rudolph labeled Clinton a drug-using Marxist, kind of dovetailing off of his gripes about university culture. He claimed that Clinton wanted to destroy patriotism and the patriarchal family unit. And I'm assuming that that's an extension off of LGBTQ rights. Following up on that, a grievance expressed by Rudolph would be LGBTQ in the military. And by that, what he's talking about is don't ask, don't tell policy. Rudolph calls out socialized medicine. He doesn't go in depth about what that means, but I'm assuming it would probably be around the Hillary Care debate, which was certainly not socialized medicine. But the ban on assault weapons, which did occur and which triggered a paranoid reaction by many individuals and groups within the broader patriot movement of the 1990s. Events that surrounded Waco, Texas, involving the Branch Davidians and Ruby Ridge with Randy Weaver. And overall, this general paranoia, neurosis of global elites overthrowing the Constitution to establish a global government. And that type of rhetoric you can hear today, ranging from places like QAnon to, well, GOP candidates. And Rudolph rationalizes and connects all of this back to the central concept that America was under attack by various forms of Marxism, or perhaps what he might call egalitarians, whether it be economic or cultural. Key targets of these Marxists were educational institutions and the traditional family unit, manifesting acceptance of abortion, gay rights, civil rights, and undermining Western civilization. These are all in one way or another familiar concepts promoted by right-wing media, internet personalities, and Republican elected officials. In response to his grievances, Rudolph decided to take action when, in his mind, others would not. He decided to attack high-profile symbols such as women's health clinics, which he called abortion mills, gay nightclubs, which he called sodomite organizations, and agents of the federal government. He hoped his actions would bridge the gap between the patriot movement's rhetoric and action. Ultimately, he hoped he would cause a revolt to overthrow the so-called elitist liberal establishment in America. And building on this, Rudolph felt that Republican leaders were not doing enough politically, and we'll look at that later. Rudolph attacked symbols of what he hated, and he expressed that. He said of one clinic bombing, it's not the clinic that I'm attacking, it's the institution of abortion that I'm attacking. Rudolph hoped his actions would spur copycats. Essentially, he wanted more violence and more destruction. And ultimately, Rudolph hoped that this would lead to a revolution. Rudolph's first and most well-known attack was on innocent bystanders celebrating the Atlanta Olympics in Centennial Park. Rudolph portrays the Olympics as an exercise in globalism and multiculturalism, which to him meant Marxism. He saw the Olympics as akin to the New World Order, one world government in action. It was socialist in concept, according to him. His plan was to shut down the Olympics with a series of bombs over a period of days. This would be a blow to the so-called globalist agenda and also strike a blow to Title X, which he incorrectly believed was government money funding abortions. Some quotes that Rudolph expressed in his description of the Olympics. The Olympics were a vehicle toward advancing a socialist model of global governance. He said that the Olympic Committee had acquiesced to this globalist agenda. And he specifically called Centennial Park the hub of activity during the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, a multicultural commune. Rudolph describes casing Centennial Park as if it were an action movie, and he were the protagonist. It is clearly meant to glorify his actions. He claims that he initially didn't want casualties, which is suspect at best. In his autobiography, he says that the goal was to plant the explosive and then call 911 with enough time for the area to be evacuated. Rudolph returned to Centennial Park the evening of July 27th, 1996. He had a light costume on, as he described it, and a backpack. The backpack contained a huge pipe bomb mechanism filled with nails. He also hid a gun for an emergency getaway situation. Rudolph got past security as he had done before in his dry run. He made his way through the crowd and left the backpack by a stage surrounded by bleacher seating. However, after that, things began to fall apart. Rudolph did find a payphone to complete the next step of his plan, alert 911 so the area could be evacuated. However, he mumbled and distorted his voice so badly in an attempt to disguise it that the 911 operator just hung up. Rudolph then panicked, believing police might follow up on a 911 hang-up call. After composing himself, he called 911 again, but had lost track of time. And he told the 911 operator that the bomb would detonate well after it was set to explode. Rudolph claims that he witnessed security and then a bomb squad find the backpack. He believed this to be a victory, as he was trying to avoid what he called civilian deaths. Whether this is true or not, who knows? However, the bomb was not defused and instead exploded, instantly killing an innocent bystander and wounding over 100 people, including first responders. Another man would later die from a heart attack brought on by the explosion. And with that, Rudolph accomplished what only Timothy McVeigh had a year or so earlier. Rudolph put patriot movement rhetoric into action. Rudolph had committed one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in the country's history, just as it had begun to heal from the 168 deaths caused by right-wing terrorist Timothy McVeigh, who we will certainly cover in another episode. In the article Fallout, an oral history of the Olympic Park bombing, Scott Freeman relays firsthand accounts of events. Michael Cox stated, "We were sitting on that bench about 30 minutes before the bomb went off, and we saw Eric Rudolph in the park. He really stood out. It was his backpack that stood out because it was huge. It wasn't a hiker's backpack. It was big and boxy. I remember wondering why in the world would somebody be wearing a backpack like that?" Tom Davis and Richard Jewell were working security that night. They described being asked to remove a few drunk folks from the stands and noticing the backpack. They shouted to the group who had been asked to leave if it was theirs, and they said it was not. Davis noted that there were hundreds of people within proximity, and they immediately called for the bomb squad. Jewell began informing people of the situation and preparing for an evacuation. Jewell stated, "I'd been out of the tower maybe a minute and kabang. It knocked me forward and I fell down on my hands and knees. As I pushed myself back up, I looked to my right because that's where the blasts come from. Those troopers that had been lined up with those benches were flying through the air. It had knocked them that far. I started running to those. Hell, they're my buddies. I get to the first guy and I'm helping him lay down. I'm telling him, just lay flat, man. We'll get you some help." Jewell, who passed away in 2007, actually became a suspect in the case, doubling down on the tragedy of events. John Fristow was a stagehand who was injured during the blast. He witnessed Alice Hawthorne's death. Hawthorne was a former U.S. Army lieutenant and member of the Chamber of Commerce. She was one of the first women to be accepted as a member of the American Legion. Rudolph didn't mention any of this, or her specifically, in his account. John Fristow said, "Miss Hawthorne, I saw her. She was coming down the hill head over heels. Seriously, it was horrible, man." He begins to weep. "I'm sorry, I've never witnessed a murder before."